Okay, so welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. Today we're gonna talk about SE 2050. This is hosted by CLF Austin, and I'm gonna drop a sign up link in the chat in case anybody here isn't already on our mailing list. But we host bi-monthly events focused on embodied carbon reduction, whether those are presentations or discussions or bringing people to action. And like I said, today we're going to focus on SE 2050. So you'll learn all about it. I'm going to present alongside Borchers and Dirk Kestner, and we'll go over the kind of background of what's the point of SE 2050, why are we doing it, go into the program mechanics, what does it actually involve, and then also talk about the newly released database for SE 2050. And then Dirk's gonna talk about his own experience as a signatory firm. And without further ado, Eric, you want to take it away?
Sure. Thanks, Martine. And I'm really happy to be part of this, sharing with you. I want to say first, I mean, Dirk has been a part of SE 2050 since before it was really even a program, before it began. So he's been through it all the way. I've been helping out for about the past year, and Martine's been really involved in the past year, developing the program as well. So from the small sample that I have, I know, in Austin, you're lucky to have just really passionate and knowledgeable advocates. So happy to share more info. Martine kind of went over this agenda already, so I'll skip past this. And generally, yeah, want you to understand the purpose, how the program actually works, and how you can get involved, whether you're a structural engineer or not. We need kind of everyone in the community, architects, owners, developers, contractors, just interested participants to sort of be aware and help spread the message about what we feel is a important and significant work. So I'll start off with the overview. And of course it is CLF, but we've got to start out with a little bit, just get everyone up to speed. Embodied carbon. So out of the global greenhouse gas emissions picture, we know the building industry overall is responsible for about 40%, roughly a third of that coming from associated with the production of building materials. So this embodied carbon piece we're looking at is about 11% of our global CO2 emissions, so this is a figure that we see a lot as buildings are becoming more efficient. Of course, that embodied carbon for the production of materials is becoming increasingly important to reduce as well. This is an SE 2050 presentation, so we're going to focus on the structures here, and there are various studies, but we come up usually around at least 50% of the embodied carbon of a building is coming from the structure, foundations and superstructure. So just general context for why structural engineers are starting to focus on this, why it's a big part of the picture. So brief history. Carbon Leadership Forum in 2019 issued this challenge stating out into the world, all structural engineers shall understand, reduce, and ultimately eliminate embodied carbon in their projects by 2050. That idea was really accepted and taken up by the SEI Board of Governors. So that's the Structural Engineering Institute of the American Society of Civil Engineers. So big national organization said, yes, we support this. And what happened after that was that folks worked to develop this program that formally launched in November 2020. So we now have, from the SE 2050 challenge, which was more of an idea, the SE 2050 commitment program has launched. So that's what we're working on now. Quick moment, would just suggest check out the website, se2050.org. There are a lot of, besides seeing the firms that have joined and accessing the database, if you're part of a signatory firm, there's a lot of general resources. And Martine will talk about that in more detail during the presentation. But since that launch in November, we have 57 or maybe even 58 firms that have committed, which is really, really exciting. These firms represent very small firms, very large firms, single office firms, global firms with offices, all over the world. So these are all firms that have already signed up to say, hey, we're going to be a part of this, and are making some specific commitments that Martine will describe in more detail. This slide hasn't been completely updated, so this is probably around 50 or so of the firms that have signed up. But we are really excited, to see the adoption that we've already had. There are tie-ins, not direct tie-ins, say like that there's some specific tie-in with AIA 2030, but we're certainly all working towards the same thing. So whereas AIA 2030 was established, initially with goals of reducing operational energy over time to net zero by 2030, we're looking at the embodied carbon of structures. There are various reasons why it will likely take somewhat longer. We want to push as soon as we can, but the goal is really to get to net zero by 2050. We may need to evaluate, maybe earlier we want to get, but going off the script there. So that's our goal. We're looking at the embodied carbon piece of it. And people often ask, and I mean this literally, many people have asked me this question, is it even possible to get to net zero embodied carbon in structures? And I'm so glad that the SEI Sustainability Committee published a white paper last year that addresses this very question. So what this paper does, I'd recommend checking it out. It lays out various paths by which we could, as an industry, get to net zero embodied carbon by 2050. And there are different tracks, different sort of levers to pull. So, we're aware that overall, like, electrical grids are decarbonizing, but we don't really have, as structural engineers or any building design professionals, have a much direct influence over that. So we know that there's going to be changes to the electrical grid. We don't know how much. What we can do, we can make design improvements in our material selection and material efficiency, material quantities. There are paths involving carbon offsets, which are not as desirable as directly actually reducing, our embodied carbon of our systems. So with that, we're aiming for getting to zero. We do believe it can be done. We've got a lot of firms signing up, committing to help make this happen. And I'm going to pass it over to Martine to dig into some of the specific program requirements before I come back and talk about the database a bit.
Great, thanks, Eric. I guess you can just keep switching through the slides. It shouldn't be too hard. But moving forward, so the SE 2050 commitment program. Here, can you go to the next slide? There we go.
I can stop sharing if you'd like.
Or yeah, sure. Let's see how seamless we can make this. You seeing that?
Yep.
Great. So the SE 2050 commitment program, it's like Eric said, it started November of last year. So we're still within our first year of the commitment. And so it's basically constructed of 3 parts, more or less. It's pretty continuous throughout the year. But immediately what happens is you formally commit to the program. That involves a couple of announcements. Within 6 months, you submit an embodied carbon action plan. And I'll go into the details of what's involved in that, but it's basically just an outline of what are we actually going to be doing. And then within 12 months, you're taking that action, you're responding to what you've laid out in your action plan, and you're submitting your project data to the database that we'll discuss later. And it's not just a 1 year, one and done sort of thing, it's ongoing. And so after that first 6 months, so I guess month 18, you'll submit another embodied carbon action plan. You'll continue to submit this project data. You'll continue to reduce over time, because when we have these goals that are multiple decades long, you need that continued engagement. Next, there we go. So formally commit, what do you do immediately? So a commitment letter from your firm leadership, somebody in the C-suite, just make sure that your whole firm is committed to this, is aware of this. And so that also includes an internal announcement, just because we understand that oftentimes you'll have a sustainability working group or an embodied carbon working group. That's not necessarily your whole firm, but given the nature of the situation, we do want to make sure we're pulling everybody along, not just those who are explicitly committed. You'll nominate an internal embodied carbon champion. That's basically the point of contact for SE 2050. That's who we'll be in touch with. You publicly declare your firm's commitment, make it known because we want to spread the word. We have 57 firms. We want to keep growing. And then share embodied carbon resources within your firm, because there's this whole spectrum of what people know and understand when it comes to embodied carbon. Some people are just hearing about it for the first time. Some people are experts, and we want to make sure that we're providing resources for everybody. So after the formal commitment, that's your embodied carbon action plan. That's within 6 months. And the principles on the right that are guiding this is education, reporting, reduction, and advocacy, because we think all of those are really important for reduction. It's not just about project work, it's also about getting other people on board and educating and all that. So for the embodied carbon action plan and education plan, that is something that's internal. That's how are you going to bring all members of your firm along for the ride? How are you going to be educating people? How are you going to be making sure that everybody understands why we're involved and what what actions your firm is taking? Knowledge sharing narrative is more externally focused. So what are you learning internally? How are you sharing your case studies? How are you sharing your best practices? Just laying out a plan for that and how you're going to do it. Your reduction strategy, what are you actually doing on projects? What actions are you going to take? What is it going to look like? In the first year, this might be pretty vague. As your firm progresses through the program, it's hopefully we'll get more and more specific. You'll get more ideas. You'll develop lessons learned, stuff like that. Your reporting plan. So reduction strategy is project specific. Reduction reporting plan is how are you going to track these numbers? How are you going to report them? What are you tracking? What tools, what LCA tools are you using? What scope are you considering? Different ideas like that. And then for the elective documentation, we have for each of these 4 principles, there are a number of different electives with certain requirements that I'll go into in a little bit. So it's just documenting what are we going to pursue, why are we pursuing it, and what's kind of the scope that y'all are taking on. And then if you're a returning firm, what are your lessons learned from the previous year? So how are you updating? How are you changing what you're doing? How are you doing a better job this year than last year? And of course, we're in our first year, so we haven't gotten to that point yet. There we go. So it's a big part of the ECAP is accountability and kind of starting that first action. And so just making sure that people explicitly say, this is what we're going to do. We're not going to hold you to every single thing you say in the ECAP, but it gets the conversation started, it gets these actions started, and it is something that's updated annually. So you continue to update these ideas. They are published on the SE 2050 website. Here's just a quick screen cap. So you can see other firms' ECAPs. If you're new to the program or you're looking for other ideas, see what other firms are doing, see how other firms are taking on this challenge. And you can, for the ECAP, you can either publish it yourself, you can kind of involve your marketing department, or there's also a Google form on the website where it simplifies the submission if that's easier for your firm. So yeah, like I was just saying, where to start, look at the other firms' ECAPs, look at what else is out there, start to get ideas. They're posted on the website. There's a Google form, you can do it within your firm, whatever works best for you. And then step 3, take action and submit projects, actually doing the stuff. So within 12 months of when you first signed, this involves submitting your project data. Like I said, we'll talk about the database later, but that just amounts to getting an embodied carbon number for your projects and then submitting it, so we can start to track different embodied carbon values for different typologies, regions, seismic activity, that sort of thing. And then we hold firms accountable for hosting an embodied carbon 101 internally. Again, this is just so everybody's getting pulled on board, not just the embodied carbon working group. And then complete the electives as required. So as you kind of outlined, and of course it's flexible to change, but there are certain requirements. So like I said, there are the 4 different categories. So this, and I'm not going to go into each and every elective, but so certain number of requirements for them and then a certain number of recommendations. The reason that it's flexible this way and we're not making everybody have 5 required electives for education or something like that, there's a really wide range of firms that are involved in SE 2050, some really small firms, some really big firms. And so to be sensitive to different capacities for taking action, we want to give flexibility to make sure that firms can stay true to the spirit of the commitment program, but also balance it with their project work and make sure that it's not too heavy of a lift. So like, I'm not going to go through each and every one of these, but just to give you an idea for electives for education, attending educational events, sharing resources within your firm, different things like that. And we'll share the slides after the presentation with everybody who signed up. So you'll have a chance. And then these are also available on the website. Electives for embodied carbon reduction. So share a case study, incorporate biogenic material in a project. These are just a couple different ideas for embodied carbon reduction for project-specific strategies. And for each of these electives, we also give room. If you want to propose your own, if you have your own idea for how you're going to take on this elective, we're open to that. We're in the first year of this commitment. We're looking to grow. We're looking to adapt. We have signatory calls where we take in input and really want to change the program because we want to make sure that it's serving everybody as best as possible. Electives for advocacy. So how are you advocating for other people, not just within your firm, but on your project teams? And so talk about it to clients. The reason the top 2 are bold, because those are 2 that we require that you do. So describe the value of SE 2050 to your clients, talk about it, letting people know that it's out there, spread the word, let's get more people signed on board. And then publicly declare your firm as a member of the SE 2050 commitment, as I said earlier. So to recap, immediately what you do, you have your formal commitment and your announcements, both internal and external. Within 6 months, you have your embodied carbon action plan. So you plan out, what are we going to do? How are we going to take action for the 4 different categories listed below? And then within 12 months, you're taking that action, you're submitting your project data, and then you continue to do that on an annual rolling basis. And that's about it for the mechanics. And it will have Q&A at the end of the presentation as well. So if you have questions, you can either drop them in the chat or we'll address them at the end, whatever works easiest for you.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, so I would say, I haven't been as directly involved in developing those program requirements as Dirk and Martin, but I appreciate how thoughtful they are in terms of just sharing, even with the electives, sharing how many ideas there are for what you can do. It's more than just performing LCA and reporting data, which is a big part of it I'm going to talk about now, but there's really a wide spectrum of things that we need to be doing. So even if you're not a part of the program yet, or you're not with the structural engineering firm, I think those program requirements are a really good one to look through to just get ideas about what we can be doing. But I am going to switch over to talking about the SE 2050 database, why there's a database and what it is since it's launched now. So if we talk about sort of one current approach, kind of an early use case of LCA, as you might use for a green building rating system, is to do a comparative whole building life cycle assessment. We say I'm going to make a mass timber building and show that it has lower embodied carbon than an equivalent other building. So it requires some rather developed detailed design of each option and making sure you're kind of making a fair comparison between one and another. But it's a lot of effort to do sort of a comparison of one building to another hypothetical building. And you're also not able to see when you do that how you're sort of comparing to the general general building design practice. So we would really need to have some kind of industry targets to understand that. So your proposed building might be average or a little better than average right now. Your proposed building could be actually higher embodied carbon than average, but it's better than some other reference design. In the future, you might have a building proposed building that is maybe a little lower than the average from 10 years ago, but not really on track with where we need to be be kind of continually reducing down toward that net zero target. So I think pretty early on the need for having better data about industry practice overall was pretty apparent. So the future approach, it would be more comparing whole building life cycle assessment results to industry-wide benchmarks. And that's what we're trying to do here. By it really is a loop, right? So firms are performing LCAs of their projects, contributing to a database that can then go towards developing benchmarks. Benchmarks of where we're at right now, and even targets of where we need to be going. So there is in the operating energy use world, there's industry benchmarks by way of the Commercial Building Energy Consumption Survey, CBEX. But again, this is not something we have yet, and that's why we're stepping in to create a database. And in the future, we'll be able to say, hey, that proposed building is here relative to benchmarks. Oops, skip that one. So in the database, what are we actually collecting? And I'll show this in the actual database soon, but a few categories of things. So project descriptors, so general information about the location, the type of building it is, gross square footage, structural system information, which I'll get into. We're getting kind of more detailed into structural system information than previous efforts have. So trying to understand out of a total global warming potential, what are the structural design factors that are kind of affecting those numbers and affecting our ability to lower our embodied carbon intensity. Then there's the actual, reporting the global warming potential data and some info about the tools that were used, what's included, so we can make sure we're more comparing, similar types of studies with each other, not having wildly different scope. I should re-emphasize at this point that SC 2050 is really solely focused on structural embodied carbon quantities. So while we completely recognize the importance of the rest of the building, there's envelope, interiors, even the MEP systems themselves have significant amounts of embodied carbon. This is our industry effort to say, what can we control and do something about right now? And what we can do right now is get a better handle on what is our impact, and then how can we reduce the impact within the scope of our control. So not going to discount anything else, the importance of it, but SC 2050 database is only counting quantities of structural materials, so foundation and superstructure. And jumping ahead a bit, there's a future, I guess a future goal is to have, we'll talk about this more, but a little more better info about the actual structural material quantities, so we can make, as we know, there are differences in databases used by different LCA tools. So trying to get some more consistency in the data that's a bit scattered just by that nature of different tools that are used. Want to mention too about the database that there are precedents. We'll not get into detail about these, but there's a DECO database. CLF did a benchmarking study that also included some of that data from DECO and from RICS in the UK. There are some other efforts we're aware of. I just want to mention that we're very aware of these other efforts and have actually been in close contact with those who've participated before. So we're not trying to invent something totally new, and are trying to use some overlapping fields where it makes sense to do so. But we're also going deeper into, say, the collection of structural system information than others have, because we have this particular focus on structural embodied carbon. I'll try to breeze through this a little faster, but the general idea is that structural firms that have signed up to the commitment program are providing this GWP and other building data to SC 2050. This data, by the way, all is there's very tight security on who can see the raw data. Even the committee members, we do not have access to the raw data of projects submitted. But in the future, when a certain amount is collected, we'll have sort of identifying information removed and bring aggregated data to an industry roundtable through which we can start to set benchmarks and targets. I mentioned earlier a future goal of collecting structural material quantities. Part of that is there's a this is just an image from the CLF benchmarking study. There's a huge variability in say GWP intensity of different buildings in past databases, and to be sure that there is a real variability, if we could actually take, say this is the exact embodied carbon of this building, the actual spread is quite large, but some of that spread does have to do with different tools used and different databases upon which they're based. So we want to reduce the data variability that we can, so we're seeing the actual sort of true variability in different designs and different materials used. So that's the idea. So in the future, whereas structural material quantities are optional at this time, we're exploring, whether that might become part of the loop where there's some additional consistency in sort of a tool used to get the GWP and feed that back into the industry roundtable. All right, next I'll do just a quick demo, if it works, just to open up the database itself. It did go live in August. If I get the right screen up here, yep, this will work. So now I'm logged into the database. That's me. With your firm, you can add projects. You're required to add some projects, but you can add as many as you'd like. So this is what the inputs look like. We got the project information. All of this info is well, I would say you cannot actually access the database if you're not a part of a C2050 signatory firm. However, there's publicly available information. So on the website, the database page of the website, you can see the user guide, for example, which describes all the different data fields that we're asking for in the database. So even if you can't log into the database, you can see what it's about and see what sorts of things are collected. But I just wanted to share it here on screen so you can see the info that's collected. And there's this optional structural material quantities where you can, it's fairly basic at this point, say concrete with different strengths. You can add optionally Portland cement content, and there's other options for other materials that align with the SC2050 ECOM tool, which I don't know if that was mentioned earlier, but won't get into it. So there's this early version of structural material quantities. Otherwise, these are the fields that we're looking at. And if the idea of going into the website and typing in all these things is not appealing to you, which it wasn't to me, so we created this spreadsheet import option, which has all the same fields that are in the database. It has the options listed or the requirements for that field listed in the spreadsheet. And you can basically gather all of your information in a spreadsheet, and when you're ready to add the project, there's a direct upload option, so you can just go in and upload the projects in your populated spreadsheet to the database. So try to make that a little easier workflow for those who would like to do that. That's really what I wanted to cover in this portion. So I think we're over to Dirk to share a firm experience.
Awesome, Eric. Thank you very much. Let me just do the swap. Turn my camera on too. All right, so now you see me and the screen, right? Eric, Martine, You can let me know if not. Well, awesome. Well, so as Martine and Eric mentioned, it's great to have so many committed people shaping SE 2050. It's really been a big effort by volunteers, and Eric and Martine both deserve a lot of kudos. Eric has been working on the database tirelessly. Looks looks very simple on the surface, but it takes a lot to make it happen. So I will put on my embodied carbon reduction champion hat and share some of the experience and process that we at Walter P. Moore have gone through as we have, crafted our ECAP, and really what I guess it's been about 9 months since we committed when the program opened a year ago. And then we'll have the opportunity to discuss. So since we have ACL coming up this week, we were joking and we decided we'd use some of this as the imagery for this. But I know that it can seem intimidating for a firm when you start and sign up. And while there's a lot of flexibility in the electives and the different measures, you still have to get your head around all of it. But I figured by sharing kind of how we stepped through it, it might be helpful. And then I'll just share some of what our product was out of our ECAP. So I think that the first point is, choose where you're going to start from. This is about building literacy. This is about advocating. This is, quite frankly, about things that probably a lot of firms aren't doing right now, or that they might be doing in a disjointed or inconsistent way. But I would say step one, look at what your firm's already doing and discuss how that aligns with your values. And then it's a real opportunity to look through those lists of electives and options and say, why are we doing this and why aren't we doing that? And then what do you need to learn, or what do you want to learn as far as the things that you're not doing? And what do you need to start doing? Which of the whys that you aren't doing do you need to start doing? In that process, it's going to get dirty. It's going to get muddy. Something's going to come up that you're not going to count on, but that's good. To help with that, I would say reach out to all your groups, all your offices, however firms are structured. If you're a sole proprietorship, this becomes a little bit easier, but make sure you get those different opinions. This is a program that's about engaging a firm. It's not about engaging a couple people in a firm, though a sustainability leadership interest group community of practice will be very important, I would say, to help pull this off. Get leadership's opinion involved early. You don't want to surprise your leadership at the end of, what is this thing that we signed up for? You'll get a lot of opinions, but that's, I think, a good thing, because it's an opportunity to teach and educate internally. Keep your eye on the big picture. The goal here is to educate and achieve embodied carbon reductions. There are a lot of questions that could come up about, and rightful questions for consistency of the database. Which LCA phases, how are we modeling, what are we doing? All of that, does need to be understood. But the big picture is we're trying to achieve embodied carbon reductions. And for all of this, start early. I will say it 2 more times. It's probably the most important thing. When you commit, it'll take a little while to get the ECAP put together. And I know we're all busy. We're all super busy. It won't be the hottest fire, that you've got, but to the extent you can start early will be beneficial. And then I think as you do that, really embrace your growth. Think about the future as you shape it. Think about, here's what we'll do this first year, but we'll, how will we grow into it? Something's going to change while you're making your ECAP. You don't know what it is, but it'll be benefit. Just have that flexibility, and that's okay. And the ECAPs and the program mechanics are really set up to accommodate that. And then some of the questions that we looked at as we were thinking about what we'd put in our ECAP were, how would we evaluate success? What do we think is reasonable? What's kind of a stretch goal? All the same things that I'm sure a lot of people think about in the annual review process when you do it. What are you learning? What do you want to learn? How are you going to disseminate what you're learning? And I'd say it's really important for that external advocacy as well. I know we have a mix of peer structural engineers, some clients, some owners on this call from the list of attendees. I'm not going to miss the opportunity to say that if you are not a structural engineer, but in this call in either a client or owner capacity, showing interest in valuing this is just from a pure business perspective a huge help for helping to make the case across the broad diversity of opinions and perspectives that I'm sure firms will face. So with that, a little pause, and then I'm just going to walk through the pages of our ECAP that you could pull down from the SE 2050 page, but kind of how that thinking went into our ECAP. So here's ours. We tried to make it engaging. We did let some of our business development folks play with the layouts and have some fun with it. There is also the Google Doc option as well. But just the pillars that Martine mentioned, education. We just talked about what we did, what we've done, and what we're doing. So that education piece, we included a embodied carbon topic on our kind of bi-weekly group-wide better practices discussions. Our internal sustainable design community of practice certainly has people who have been working on embodied carbon for years, but we got this out to the firm-wide group. We've also talked about it at kind of our principal levels meetings as well, and our stockholders meeting, and we're working on giving, probably the way the year's shaping out, it'll be more virtual, but the basic embodied carbon 101 talks. We also are working to have members really engaged in the CLF hubs in every city where there is one, and we're helping to form one in Dallas right now. And then we've incorporated it into our onboarding program. For reporting, we're using some tools that we're developing to create dashboards like this, so that design teams can have the embodied carbon at their fingertips while they're designing, because that's really important to see how design choices impact. This gets really deep into how a firm tracks data, manages data, visualizes it, but that's some stuff that I would say is good to think about for your firm. What are you doing with data for other reasons, such as cost or reducing uncertainty, and then how can you take that data and turn it into carbon data? Reductions, we really focused on tracking and transparency for this year. We have a number of other strategies that we've been incorporating, say through our concrete specifications and requiring EPDs for different materials. For SE 2050, Eric mentioned in the database, there's a piece of, we need to get these benchmarks, but we also need to know what data, what's being tracked in terms of assemblies, what life cycle stages. So we set that up to really work on tracking and knowing how we're tracking what we're tracking for this year. But our thought on how to get the most bang for the buck and track was that we do know our revenue on projects. So loosely, revenue is somewhat proportional to the size, and size is proportional to the amount of material used. So we set a goal of tracking embodied carbon for 50 projects that represent 50% of our new design revenue and structure, which we hope will kind of loosely correlate to 50% of the material that we're specifying. And then finally, advocacy, just looking at what we are doing and what we're doing externally. Some of that comes to just posting and sharing really SE 2050 commitment specific things. Others are related to kind of our embodied carbon report that we published and external speaking. Finally, just looking at who people could contact, but really, I think we could distill this down into something that my colleague Kelly Roberts has said, but just every time you have a project, look at where the carbon is, do something, make an estimate, start to measure, and then you can start to act. So with that, I'll stop sharing, and Martine or Eric, I don't know if you've got a image for the Q&A, but we can go into that.
Yeah, before Q&A, I want to quickly go into just a couple of resources. Give me 1 second.
Sorry, I totally skipped over you.
No worries at all. let's see. All right, hopefully you're seeing my screen.
Yes.
So we understand this is a, wait, hold on. There we go. Yeah, it's a two-way commitment. So we're asking a lot of the firms, and it's really great to see firms like Walter P. Moore that are really stepping up to the plate and putting together an awesome ECAP like that. But because it's a big ask, we know that we want to support these firms however we can from SE 2050. So we supply a number of resources on the website. We have regular signatory calls, or we will continue to have regular signatory calls where we just have conversations with signatory or representatives from signatory firms about what's going well, what's not going well, how can we update the program, how can we help you out? Because as we remember the big picture, we're just trying to reduce embodied carbon. So however we can update the program to best do that and most effectively support firms is what we aim to do. So on the SE 2050 website, the resources section, you'll see these 6 different categories. So embodied carbon, materials, strategies, tools and data, case studies, and green building rating systems. And within each of these categories, there are a number of resources. Some of them are listed here. So what is embodied carbon? How is it measured? Embodied carbon intensity diagrams. We mentioned the ECOM earlier. That's embodied carbon order of magnitude. And that's basically a super simple tool. If you want to put in some quantities, you can get somewhat of an idea of where's the carbon coming from. But all of these are meant to support SE 2050 signatory firms and other people, just general knowledge. And I will say even beyond just what's provided on SE 2050's website, there's a whole host of resources on the Carbon Leadership Forum's website and elsewhere. A lot of people are producing content because we're in a stage in embodied carbon reduction where a huge part of it is awareness and advocacy and that having that like embodied carbon 101 conversation. And so what can we do? I saw a comment in the chat that was I think a material supplier, what can I do? Or as a manufacturer? If you're a structural engineer, join the 2050 commitment program. It'll be an ongoing conversation. We'll be able to support you, and we'll help you develop these programs for your firm. For everybody, educate yourself on embodied carbon reduction strategies. Everybody has a role to play. This specific program is focused on structural engineers, but everybody has a stake in it. Everybody has something that they can do. Everybody can participate in these conversations. Share your data with the database, go above and beyond within the program. The more data we have, the better we can inform these benchmarks. Create your ECAP, participate, and yeah, can continue to have that conversation. And you can also donate to the program because we're all volunteers here, and some of the stuff costs money. So, but I think the biggest one, advocate within the industry, talk to your clients, talk to everybody. This is really a team effort. So we all need to get on board, and we need to have these conversations early and often. And with that, I think we should be free to open it up to Q&A or just general conversation. Let me see if there's anything else in the chat. So Eric responded to Jason's question in the chat. Is the project database open to the public, open to CLF members? Eric, I don't know if you wanted to, I see your comment, but.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, only signatory firms can actually access the database. We will be publishing results of analysis, from data in the database. We'll be publishing some things, publicly, because we want everyone to benefit from the knowledge. There's some aspect of like there's a little more access, to member firms to some of the data, like maybe at a slightly less aggregated level. Hard to explain it in real detail. So there's a little bit of a benefit, to being a member firm, to maybe a little earlier or different kinds of data access, but we do intend certainly to publish results of studies from it. And at no point is any, individual project specific information or the raw data, from projects going to be released to the public or even released to other participating firms.
I think that's a key, Eric. Maybe as far as the data piece, and that's been discussed extensively, but that, it certainly is not that even if you're a member firm, you can go in and find a project in a row, if you think about it in tabular format, and see that whole row. You know, it is I don't want to get my terms wrong, Eric, but it is anonymized and then aggregated, so that you also can't just hunt for a project. That's the intent, to avoid that.
And the next question that I saw was, how can manufacturers supplying products into concrete production best support your efforts? Yeah, my first thought is when you're working with structural engineers or anybody else, just have the conversation, see if they're joining stuff like SE 2050 or Architecture 2030. And then understanding the mechanics of the program, understanding how hopefully your products that are supporting like low carbon concrete might fit into something like this, might inform a reduction strategy. Then have that conversation, say, hey, you should join this program, and also we can help support you. We can be part of your reduction strategies.
I would add on that as well, to the encourage and educate the manufacturers on, getting EPDs. I would say put numbers to it, because if while it is a few steps from where we are right now, and perhaps using a tool like Ecom that's easy but quick and dirty, having the data through an EPD for those improved mixes will help immensely in the future.
Hey, Dirk and Martine, this is Tom Gibbons. I had a question. Sorry if I could jump in. Martine, is that all right? Or did you want to?
Oh, go for it. Yeah, we're Q&A.
Okay. I just didn't want to step on anybody in the chat. I guess Mark might be up next. On the low carbon concrete, I've been getting a lot of questions lately, as sort of a pseudo sustainability shaman in the firm, hopefully, just about cost and how that works. And, because essentially, obviously, developer driven, or even not, I'm trying to, as I always say, like, we're not McDonald's, we don't take orders. That's what I always tell people. But obviously there's a lot of push on cost. So the question for me that comes out very early when I just introduce embodied carbon to folks in the firm, they're like, how much does it cost? And my answer generally with low carbon concrete, depending, is like, I don't really know. I kind of err on the side of it's not so much cost as it is just comfort and planning. I don't know if y'all would have a different reaction to that. I mean, whether it's generally just fly ash and cement replacement, but just in general, my push is usually like, it's not so much cost, it is education, and frankly, just like laziness of not pushing our engineers to go through all the mixes and to really figure out, I don't know, exposure classes and cure times and all that, and putting that effort in. And then also on the GC side, people aren't comfortable with certain things, and they have the place they always go and they get ready mix, and that's just the way it's going to be. Do you think that's a relatively sound thing to say, or is it like, no, these things generally cost more, but the idea is that you educate people about why they cost more and what the good things they're doing are in the world?
Who do you want to take it?
I was going to let you take it, but I'm happy to talk.
Okay, no. So I would say that there's try to hone this in. So we talk a lot about low carbon concrete. There's no ISO definition of low carbon concrete, but the best would be, say, beating the NRMCA averages. Then the question I would say is, by how much and how low are you going? And some of it, Tom, I would say is exactly as you laid out, that some of this is simply thinking about and challenging convention, and challenging convention for broadly grouping and simplicity. And then there's another level, and all of that, I think, does not add a cost. It should be kind of a meeting of sitting down and discussing. Now, there's more effort to quantifying just how much, savings that comes to if you do this with mix A and this with mix B, and so what does it matter, and how hard should we then push mix C? That all comes into analysis time. Then there's another level of bringing in technologies or things that have not yet existed in a given market, changes that may not have a cost, but could have a cost to get greater levels of reduction, because that would both be more soft cost time, hard cost. If there's not a set of mixes and the ready mix supplier needs to go do batches and other things, that is effort. But I think that there's not a single answer. Some of this all is just squeezing out some inefficiency and thinking about doing things differently. And then there's another level that is much greater reductions.
I'd add with, cost or just effort, which often means cost. Dirk said it 3 times. It's like start early, not just with your ECAP, but also like on a project. The earlier you have the conversation, the earlier you develop the strategies, the easier it'll be, and often the cheaper it'll be. So start early, start early, start early. I think that gets us at 7. And then for Eric, is the project data all at the design phase? Is there any truing up with constructed data? And when do firms submit the project data? Is it design phase, construction phase?
Sure. So we accept project data from any design phase, even as early as SD. If you have an LCA or embodied carbon data, you can submit it, but also data can be edited at any time by the submitting firm. So it would be possible and even encouraged to, update the final GWP numbers later on in the project. So yeah, we don't want to discourage anyone from submitting. You do have to submit like complete data, so you have to have enough to really have a reasonable set of quantities, but you can submit at any time. And then importantly, we have users note at what phase the project is when the LCA is performed, or when the embodied carbon count is performed anyway. And maybe one other piece of your question is like, are we truing it up with real construction quantity data? I would say at least for the next few years, I don't expect that most projects are going to be based on say actual construction quantities. We're the best I think we're going to do is say like CD, complete design phase quantities estimated from a BIM model. However, we're also in the works of publishing sort of a deeper LCA methodology guide to try to capture and point people to best practices for, hey, these are the types of quantities that may be overlooked in a BIM model, that you should consider adding on for, that sort of thing. So we want to not only collect data, which is going to be from a whole wide range of experience, performing LCAs right now, but as sort of the organization, SE 2050, we also want to point and drive everyone toward, ourselves included, right? Anyone who's participating in it, point towards better practices, right? So we can believe the data more.
I think the other piece I'd add, that's a great question. It was Mark who asked it right about quantities. This being a structural engineer focused program, there's some broader industry questions of what quantities do structural engineers know and in what way. Whether this is kind of on a bay level or an absolute level, just even for superstructure, and then who knows how much concrete goes into the foundations and deep foundations. Obviously the builder and owner should, because they're paying for however many trucks show up, but some of this just has not been tracked. So I think that what longer term and this how much embodied carbon is in our buildings will become a multi-party exercise, and we'll understand correlations between what engineers think at the end of design and what actually gets built based on just site uncertainty.
Great. And then the next question from Ian is about, on the topic of low carbon concrete and new technology, has anyone investigated using bubble decks? I'll take this opportunity just to highlight the importance of getting stuff like product specific EPDs. So regardless of whatever the new technology is, it's getting there's a sort of a built-in marketplace to promote that. So if we're putting concrete EPDs into I guess something like a bubble deck would be more like per square foot, but I'll still take this opportunity to promote EPDs because as we're promoting these technologies, whether it's concrete or any other material, we need to have a marketplace for comparison and for incentivizing and understanding what is the lowest carbon option and making sure that we're not just checking a box, but instead having a performance-based and verifiable reduction in embodied carbon. So for a material basis, if it's lower carbon concrete rather than a lower carbon like floor system, EPD is a great way to do that. For a lower carbon floor system, if we start to get a lot of different, like we're sorting through this data, that's part of the reason for the database is we can have a better understanding of what's producing this lower carbon stuff. What are the levers, what's important to understand, and it takes a database to get there. But personally, I have not designed with a bubble deck. I don't know if Dirk or Eric want to talk about more innovative approaches that they've seen. I do think there's a lot of stuff that's not necessarily innovative, but just low-hanging fruits that people aren't doing that are really easy to implement.
Yeah, I agree with your response. We want all innovations that can help reduce embodied carbon, and we want to just know that we can actually track that and understand what differences and any technology or design improvements can make. Yeah, because
the thing to avoid, the thing to avoid would be like bubble decks are great, and then you have a bubble deck with like a lot of cement, and it ends up not being like it shouldn't end up being that a bubble deck is something that you can check a box. It should be something where we do the analysis and make sure that it's verified. Sorry, Dirk, I cut you off.
No, that's okay. No, you set me up. So it's, I think that building upon that. So yes, I mean I have looked at this, but both in other places on the West Coast where it's more prevalent, and it's been discussed in Austin. But I think the questions that come up are, are the builders familiar? How does it price out? That's quite frankly been where it's died on those cases. But from the LCA perspective and the measuring perspective that Martine mentioned, there's kind of what's in the bubble deck question, but the other one would be, what are the boundaries that we're looking at? And is, if it's not built in Central Texas, are we trucking bubble deck slabs from some far distance, or how does the whole system work together?
On the same topic from Lee, are there 3 or 4 things to change in concrete that will always be lower EC so you can confidently spec even without an EPD? There are reliable reduction strategies for sure. The thing to avoid is, or the thing to understand when using them is like, what's your baseline? I mean, there are a lot of different ways to reduce embodied carbon, whether that's SCM replacement, whether that's including carbon cure, whether that's specifying strength at a later, like 4K site at 56 days rather than at 28 days. Pretty much all of them come down to ways to reduce the cement content. And so if you say my cement content was going to be really, really high, like 700 PCY, and I reduced from that already high baseline, sure, it's better. But I know Dirk earlier mentioned the NRMCA baselines. So understanding where it fits relative to that. So things that to me, the most important thing that you should specify is producing an EPD, getting a product specific EPD for your concrete, because like you can't reduce what you're not measuring. And if we rely too much on check boxes, like I have carbon cure, it's a low carbon mix, we're not going to get the results that we want. Carbon cure can reliably get you 5% reduction, but if you're already way over the average, you can't really call it a low carbon concrete mix. So yes, there are strategies, but I would emphasize that it's more important to like track the numbers than track the strategies.
Well said.
Any other? I know we blocked out 90 minutes for this. I don't expect to take that whole time, of course, but I know we're a little bit past the hour. I'm happy to stay on if there are any other questions. Oh, there we go. Does SE 2050 coordinate with AIA 2030 at all for outreach and knowledge sharing? I assume there's a large amount of overlap. Not explicitly. I would say, speaking from CLF Austin's perspective, and also speaking from Austin Energy Green Buildings perspective, with these different commitment programs, we understand that they're working in tandem with one another. And so we promote them alongside, but like within the SE 2050 team, there's not any like explicit coordination that we're doing with Architecture 2030. We have the same goals. We have a lot of similar ideas. I don't know if y'all want to elaborate more on that, but
there have been at least discussions. Dirk, were you involved with any discussions with the AA 2030 earlier?
Yeah, I was gonna, and so there's, and maybe there's two. So there's Architecture 2030 and AA's 2030 commitment, which in this little matrix or org chart. So the way that I think we could best think about things is that Architecture 2030 and CLF mothership kind of are somewhat parallel, and then AA's 2030 commitment that AAA is leading and SEI's SE 2050 are parallel. So we have at the leadership levels of SE 2050 discussed alignment with AIA, and really have, it's been a great opportunity. I guess when we still met in person, that was about 2 years ago. We had folks from AIA to SEI's headquarters in Reston for a meeting to explain to SEI leadership kind of how AIA's 2030 program was conceived, was implemented, was run. AIA has a lot more money than SEI, so they have some full-time staff, which is a great thing for them. So we have alignment in discussion. So knowledge sharing, I would say, yes, is there. Outreach is not really coordinated. That's probably a good point for something to add. The one place of overlap that I think is still developing is, DDX, which is the database for AA 2030. They're asking entrants to put in an embodied carbon number now, but it is less defined as to what goes into it. The SC 2050 group has taken a bit more of a, you can get it different ways, but we want to know how you got that number approach. So SE firms may be getting requests from their clients for an embodied carbon number, but as all for DDX, eventually we'd like to harmonize or align that, but there's a lot of understanding what's in the number that needs to happen.
anything else or just general comments? You can share how excited you are about SE 2050 now that you've learned so much about it, if you'd like.
I'm excited.
Thank you, Eric.
Excited to see you all coming to hear about the program too. So yeah, if there's a way for everyone to get involved as a participant or an advocate, getting the word out.
Martine, I am also excited. I am now that I know we need to sign up to get access to the database, I'm going to try to get the 3 structural engineers who I don't know live in a cave in Dallas or something at Page. I don't know where they are. I've never seen them, but we have some. And if we can get ourselves signed up, I want to get into the database. Dirk, you're right. I'm more familiar than I'd like to be with the DDX and the 2030, whatever we're signed up for. I guess it's Architecture 2030 has a challenge, and then the AIA does the commitment. And I guess we're technically signed to the commitment that says we're going to follow the challenge, whatever it is. I think that's right.
I think that's, I don't know that you're wrong, so we're going to go with that.
Okay, yeah, I think that's what it is. But obviously that's operational stuff. And on the embodied side, you're right. I think they asked the question, but it's all currently it's like, it's not mandatory, right? It's like voluntary. And then they ask like, what did you use? Was it Tally or Athena or whatever, but I don't think you have to really fill any of that in at all. So we have some numbers from whole building LCAs that we've done for sort of lead compliance. And I think our shop here, we've trained up pretty well to be I think, in a pretty good ballpark of running whole building life cycle assessments, but still, there's still a lot of unknowns, and I don't know. Martine would probably do one a lot differently than I do one at Tally to some extent. So I think we're in the ballpark, but not everyone would be, I can imagine. And what you included versus what you didn't gets can be complicated. So I think I get it now that we might run, if we're going to get data to sort of get a better benchmarking idea, it might be better to stay with SE 2050 for a while before we start to pull in 2030 numbers, because I could see them being pretty all over the place. So
I'll just point out too that there are a number of firms that are AE firms or multidisciplinary engineering firms, that are part of the program. So if you have structural engineers, your firm can be a signatory firm, kind of on behalf of them. And even better, if you're not a structural engineer, but you outnumber the structural engineers in your firm and can compel them and just say, hey, we're going to do this.
Yeah,
all the better.
Yeah. Sadly, there's a principal in charge of their group, and I'm a lowly nothing. So that could be problematic in this corporate structure in which I exist in. But nonetheless, yeah, I hear you. I invited him today. If someone from Page Structural is on here, please speak up. But we'll see. We'll keep pushing on it, see what happens. So it's exciting.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Tom. If there are no other questions, please interrupt me if you have a question. But I think we can wrap it up. And we'll have a recording of this. We'll post it on our YouTube channel. I'll send it to everybody who registered for the event. I'll also send a sign up link if you want to sign up for CLF Austin updates if you're not already on the list. But thanks everybody for joining. We really appreciate it. It's really fun to talk about SE 2050. We hope to see a couple more signatories from Austin joining. And thanks to Dirk and Eric as well.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Martine. Thanks, everyone.